What in the world is Bitcoin? Well, my friend, that's what this nugget is all about. I'm so excited. Let's jump in. Let's imagine that you and I are going to visit one of our favorite customers, and they happen to be on like the 42nd floor of a skyscraper downtown. So we drive down together through traffic, we park in the parking lot, we walk into the lobby, wait for the elevator, and we're on the way up to that 42nd floor. Now, on the way up, people are leaving the elevator and people are joining the elevator as they make their various stops. And somebody asks us, hey, can you tell me something about this Bitcoin? I hear all about it, but I don't know what it is. Can you assist me with really understanding what it's all about? I'd like to pause right there with you and I, and that, my friend, is the objective of this nugget, is that we can clearly understand this concept of Bitcoin, what it means, how it works, just from a conceptual perspective. So if somebody did come to us and ask us, hey, can you tell me about Bitcoin? We could, in a fairly brief elevator ride, explain the concept of Bitcoin. Let's begin. So we'll take a look at a tale of a few cities, and I want to put you and I in charge of these cities. Now, one of the things that's required for our city is going to be a need for some type of money. Now, yeah, Keith, I get it. We all need money. Well, what is exactly money? Let's start there. Money is something that's easily traded, that people have some association of value with. Hopefully it's corrosion proof. For example, if we used rose petals as currency or money, that probably wouldn't be too effective because that's going to disintegrate and it's not going to survive very long. So it has to be fairly robust, fairly easy to use, and likely very small. So we might use something like a coin to go ahead and represent a unit of trade inside of our city. So let's start off with gold and or silver coins. And here's how you and I could play it. If no currency existed, no money existed anywhere, we could simply go ahead and generate these coins. First of all, we have to get the gold, and we have to get a mint, for example, to produce these. And as we produce them, we'd very likely put the name of the mint who manufactured the coin, the actual weight of the coin, the gold or silver, and how pure it is. You know, it's 94% pure silver or what have you. And we put all that in the coin, and then we would distribute these into circulation. Maybe we hire some people to work for us, and we just give them the coin as a payout for working for us, and that starts the circulation. Or maybe we just dump a whole bunch of money for every citizen or something else. But we get the coins into circulation, and they use it. Now, one of the challenges that we're going to have is that once this coin is in circulation, is that we need to deliver, you and I need to deliver on some promises. For example, if we got elected, we probably made some promises, like we're going to have a lot of public services, like hospitals and schools. Yes, you know, nobody's against hospitals or schools, but unfortunately, it takes money to build those. So there's two ways of getting monies from our citizens. We can either tax them and ask them to just give it to us, which by law we could enforce. However, if the taxes get too high, history has a lot of examples of people revolting and separating from the people, their leaders, because of taxes being too high. So we can tax them to some extent, as much as they'll take, but we can't tax them to pay for everything. So what are our additional options? Well, we could borrow money. And who do we borrow it from? We could borrow it from the citizens. You know, they have the money. We could borrow it from them. And we could do things like a bond and say, we need to raise this money. We'll pay it back over time with little interest. And we could borrow the money from our citizens. And that way we could help pay for it. Now, let's say we taxed, we borrowed, but we still didn't have enough money for our roads and our schools and our hospitals and our vacations and everything else that's critical for us as leaders. What we could also do is we could also just make more coin. Now, if we're using gold or silver, maybe we don't have any more gold or silver to make coins out of. Then what do we do? Well, here's an idea. It's just an idea, and I want to run it by you. The idea goes something like this. We take the coins that come into the treasury periodically, and we'll just shave off a little bit of the edge right here. We'll just shave off a little teeny, like a few millimeters here and a few millimeters there. We'll shave off the edges, and we'll take all those filings, the shavings, and we'll make additional coins out of them, and maybe no one will notice. So if we do that for a while, guess what? Let's say we did that and we generate 50% more coin, more money for our use. We just paid for a whole bunch of stuff. That's great. But at the same time, the guy who sells pizzas, as he's looking at those coins, he's going to say, wow, this coin doesn't seem right. It seems like it weighs less. And what's going to happen as we have more coins distributed, which is, by the way, is called inflation, where we have more currency, the actual value of each of those coins is going to be less. Now in our case, it's partly because we were shaving the edge of these coins to make new ones. But the general concept is once you have more of something, the law of supply and demand says, well, if there's more, the value of it goes less. So the more coins we actually pump out, the lesser value each of those coins is going to have, especially if you used our technique of shaving off the actual edges. In fact, if you take a look at these coins up here, they use a process on the edge to create these little marks, and it's called reeding, R-E-E-D-I-N-G. And originally it was for the purpose of if somebody tries to shave off some of that stuff, the reeding is not going to be there, and as a result you can tell that was shaved off. So here, at least in the U.S., back before the 1960s, we actually had a lot of silver in much of our coin, in our half dollars and quarters and so forth, and so they put this reeding on there to help prevent somebody from shaving. Now the actual metal that we use in these coins is no longer precious metal, and there's not really a big risk of somebody trying to shave off a little bit of a hunk of metal. However, I think the reeding is there for historical purposes, or maybe it was just so people wouldn't feel bad when they started getting new quarters in the 60s that didn't have reedings, say, hey, what's up with this quarter? It doesn't feel right. So the reedings are still there today on many coins around the world. So let's do a quick review of how we did with our first city. Let's say that we did not actually start skimming the edges off of our coins. There would be a central authority, that'd be us. And are these coins going to lose their value? Assuming we don't counterfeit and devalue, debase the coin by actually reducing the actual amount of gold or silver in it, the answer is no, it's not very likely to lose its value. And is inflation likely? For example, if we have a coin standard with gold or silver and people are buying a pizza is 1 gold coin, in 2 years, if we don't print more money, is there going to be inflation? And the answer is very likely there's not going to be inflation. If that's our currency and it's working and we're not printing more currency, there's very likely not to be any inflation. That's with silver and gold coins. Now let's also just take a moment. Let's go to a second city. Now in the second city, they took a look at our example of using silver and gold coins. They thought, you know what? It's kind of a pain for people to have to carry around gold coins and silver coins and have transactions that way. Let's do this. Let's store the coins, the gold, the silver coins, and so forth, in some kind of a secure environment, and then we can give the individuals notes, papers, that represent that gold or silver, whether it's gold bars or gold bricks or an ounce of gold or an ounce of silver, some paper, and that's what I refer to as a note. Now this is not a fiat note, which we'll talk about here in a moment, but a real note that represents like a silver certificate or a gold certificate. So if I trade, if these two, the pizza guy sells a pizza and he's given a note for 1 ounce of silver or 1 ounce of gold, better be a darn good pizza at 1 ounce of gold. Anyway, he gets that note. If we're using real, resources to back that up, this pizza vendor could then go to the building that stores this, hand them the note like an IOU, and it says, I am authorized to get this. I was given this note, and he could actually withdraw that. Or the pizza vendor could simply use that note to trade for something else. So the actual gold and silver could sit somewhere, but actually having the actual resources sitting there is a fantastic thing. Notes simply make it convenient to work with those real resources. So let's take a look at yet another city. And this time you and I are still in charge, but this time we're going to use some kind of a fiat money system. Now, what exactly is a fiat money system? Here's how, you're going to love this. Here's how we do it. We get a piece of paper and we say this is worth 4 bars of gold. We just write it on there, and then we hand it to people to pay our debts and so forth. And the people receiving it are going to say, what? This paper you're saying is worth 4 bars of gold? And they may not want to accept it as being valid, but what we do, because we're in charge of the city, is we force it by law. We make it legal. We make paper our legal tender for paying debts and so forth. And that's what fiat money is all about. It's simply paper that has been mandated by the organization who issued that paper to have value. It's not tied literally to any gold or silver or anything else precious on the back end. It's simply by law enforced as being valued to some point. Now I bring up fiat notes as in paper, and there's also fiat coins because the coin originally was silver or gold used for money. But now there's no silver or gold in most of our currencies, most of our coins, in most of our organizations around the world today. Now, are there still gold coins and silver coins? The answer is absolutely yes. Are they extremely valuable? The answer is yes. They have not lost their value. then they won't lose their value until everybody decides there's no use for them, there's no need for them, and they just want to throw them in the trash. At that point, they'll lose their value. But until then, until they become non-useful, they're going to be very, very valuable still, the actual real coins. Now, our coins in any country that we live in are worth effectively what people think that money system is worth. So if it's you and I, and I'm going to bring this back to you and I so I stay out of trouble here. So if it's you and I in charge of this city and we have this fiat system, how did we get into our jobs? We got into our jobs because we were elected. We said, we'll provide public schools and we'll provide hospitals and roads, all the things that are wonderful and everybody needs. And now we're elected and we need to make it happen. So how do we do that? We can, raise the taxes to bring more money in so we can pay for those things. We can borrow. So we can borrow the money, very likely from the citizens, or maybe we go to another city that's doing better and we borrow money from them and we promise to pay it back with an interest rate later. Or, check this out, we could go ahead and simply cause inflation. Now, I was shocked. I've been around for a while. I'm over 40, but I was shocked when I was on an airplane. I was coming back from London, and I got an upgrade. It was fantastic. That doesn't happen too much to me. Anyway, I was sitting in this nice seat, sitting next to this nice gentleman, and we struck up a conversation. He was an international banker, and I asked him, I said, what is the solution to the challenges that we're facing? And he said, well, the challenge is that you can't spend indefinitely more than you make. So at some point, there needs to be a reconciliation of that. And I said, so what's the solution to solving that problem? He goes, well, one solution is inflation. And I said, what? I always thought inflation was just one of those things that happened. You get a job, you get a little raise, the prices of food and stuff goes up a little bit, you try to keep up with it, and then you die, right? I thought that was just natural progression of the human race. He goes, no, inflation is usually caused by governments. And I said, tell me more. And he said, well, what happens is that people have needs, and these are the same needs. They have needs to build roads and infrastructure and pay for, public services and things that they promise to do. And so they'll borrow the money. If they can tax for it, they will. They can borrow the rest of it, and they can also just print money. They can print it because we're using a fiat money system. So as they print more money, here's the negative impact of that. If we print more money, this is you and me, I'm talking about you and me in charge of the city. If we print more money, the value of that money is going to decrease, which makes the prices of everything increase. And that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of it. So if we borrowed, millions or trillions of dollars today, and then we continue to debase our currency by creating inflation, by printing more and more and more currency, that effectively gives us the opportunity to pay off our bills, you and I, later with a devalued unit of money. Fantastic. It's like a win-win, right? The unfortunate reality is that somebody is paying for it. Somebody has to pay the piper. And usually that's going to be, as a whole, our entire city. So our entire city can suffer when inflation goes through double digits and so forth as our money is debased and debased and debased. In fact, for most monetary systems, if you look at the value of their unit, whatever it was, 100 years ago, if it's still in play, and a lot of them don't survive that long, and you look at the value today, you could be looking at a 5% value of what it was 100 years ago. So the money you're saving today is going to be worth 5% 100 years from now, assuming you're still alive then, but it's only going to be worth 5% of what it is now if the current trends continue. So with a fiat system, our notes, our paper, our coins, they're just legal tender in our city. And so do we have a central authority? The answer is yes. Is it going to lose value? The answer is always yes, because we are going to print more money to pay for the things that we need. That inflation that occurs and the debasing of the currency is all aware. We're aware that it's happening, but we feel like it's a necessary evil. So it is going to lose value, and inflation is going to happen, especially if it's in a central authority, any fiat money system. That's unfortunately what's going to happen. So we've taken a couple approaches to dealing with a money system, using gold or silver coins or notes that represent that gold and silver that's tangible and real, and also fiat money systems with some of their pros and cons, and what the leadership of who's in charge of that might do. For example, if some conflict comes up and we need more money, we can simply print more money, and that it causes inflation, which debases the value of our unit of money in our city. So what I'd like to do now is take a look at a third option, and that is you and I once again in charge of a city, but this time we don't take a salary. We don't even take commission. We don't get bonuses. We simply say, you and I say we have our own businesses in place. They're doing fine. We want to volunteer our time at the city center just to go ahead and make sure that our city runs smoothly. We don't want to be a burden to the citizens of our community. Now, if our, assuming our objectives are pure and we don't have any side motives like passing laws that influence our businesses directly over somebody else's, assuming our motives are pure, that's a beautiful thing, because now we're not burdening the taxpayers by having to support us full time while we sit there and, you know, run the city. We're going to do it voluntarily. So here's our idea, you and I, regarding money, because we are definitely going to need some type of money for transactions in our city. So here's what we propose. We propose that for our money system, we are going to have a fixed quantity. And that fixed quantity, maybe it starts at, I don't know, you know, it starts at 1,000 units and it goes up to 21 million units. Now, 21 million, anything sounds like a lot, but if you think about the if you think about the trillions of units that are in some currencies, it's not that much. And so what we do is we say, you know, we're going to go ahead and we're going to max out the currency at 21 million. That will be it. We will not make any more than 21 million. So at least when it hits 21 million, as far as inflation goes, because we're not just printing more of these monetary units, there won't be inflation due to the fact that we're going to make 44 million or 100 million or a trillion of these units. We're going to do 21 million and we're going to stop right there. And we'll put it in law so that we can't actually later change our mind and say, nope, we're going to change that based on some need that came up. We'll simply lock it down to 21 million. We'll take a closer look at that here in just a moment of how we actually distribute them into circulation, but we'll be fair about it. We're not just going to take a few people and say, hey, here's 10 million units, have a good time, and make sure everybody works for you. We'll distribute them fairly so that everybody has an equal starting point. And then people who do work for the city, for example, maybe somebody volunteers to be a secretary or somebody has a part-time job at the downtown office, maybe we can pay them with our unit, and that's one way of getting the money into circulation with our citizens, which may seem a little unfair because we're in control of it. But if you look at the other options as well, if we have a treasury with gold and gold coins, obviously they're distributing it somehow to the citizens as well. And in many cases, it'll be for some goods or services that are rendered by a citizen. Maybe somebody is going to, build us a town hall. So as a payment for that, we give them some of the money as a result for the work they did. So we get the money injected fairly into the community so they can start trading with this new monetary system. Now, besides just having the currency available in our new city for you and I, we also need some way for the people to transact. So in the past, we've used either notes or coins, but we realize, you know what, it's the 21st century. Everybody's got a digital device of some type. Let's go ahead and allow transfers to happen electronically between parties. So let's say we have Bob, who's citizen number 1, and Lois, who I almost want to say Alice because we love Bob and Alice, but Bob and Lois, citizen number 1 and citizen number 2, if they want to go ahead and exchange some of these units, the money for our city, we can go ahead and have them do it digitally. So it'll go something like Bob will send it, there'll be a password involved that authorizes his money to be sent to Lois, and she can have it, and then she can go ahead and use it to transfer it to somebody else for another goods or service. But one thing we're going to do right off the bat is we're going to say this money by itself, you can't turn it in. You can't come to the town hall and say, I've got 500 of these units. I want, there's no gold or silver backing it up. But guess what? There's no gold or silver backing up these guys either. There's only a government system in these fiat systems that say, hey, this is worth X, and you got to do it to be within the law. But here, we're going to say, you know what, if you don't want to use this, citizens, you don't have to. However, if you all use it and all want to, participate in it, it's really great because there won't be inflation because we're going to control the maximum number of units out there, and it's super easy to use if you've got a computer. So Bob on his computer and Lois on her PDA. You could have a Samsung device, an Apple device, a laptop or PC, whatever you want, and they could transfer these units back and forth for goods and services so that it was successful. Now we have another problem with doing this whole system, and that is, how do we keep track of it all? If we have 21 million units and Bob has some and Bob transfers them to Lois and Lois transfers some to the pizza guy, how do we keep track of exactly where those are? Because that is a big part of it. We don't want Bob to do a transfer to Lois and then at the same time try to do a transfer of the same units to Jill at the same moment. Because if he only has 5 units, he's trying to spend them and give them to Lois, we don't want to have him double spend it. So we need some great accounting, so we think, well, let's hire some accountants. So we'll hire some accountants, and what we'll do is this. Every time there's a transaction from Bob to Lois or from Lois to Jill or whoever else we're moving these units around from, we'll have an accountant department that keeps track of everything. Every transaction. So we'll know they came from this person, they went to that person, and we'll keep track of all of it. Now the negative side of keeping track of all it, now it's electronic, right? So it wouldn't be too much work, but if we have an accountant department who is sitting at City Hall, that is going to cost money. We're going to have to pay the accountants to keep track of all the transactions and verify that each transaction was, official and authenticated between the right party and the right person who received it, and that would cost money to do. So that money, unfortunately, would have to be paid out of taxes or something else. Why don't we do this? Instead of hiring an accounting department, let's go ahead and simply ask from our citizens if they have some free computing power and a little bit of hard disk space that they would be willing to allocate for this process. And so let's say we have a community of, let's say, 100,000 people, and that's in our city. And out of 100,000, let's say we have 20,000 that all say, you know what, my PC sits idle most of the night. Yeah, I'll chip in. You have a little program that runs in the background. And so what we do is we hire some programmers, which does cost some money. We hire a programmer to write an application. And what this application is going to do is going to keep track of all the currency. It's going to distribute that entire database of all the transactions across these 20,000 computers. And every time a new transaction is done, our computers, these 20,000 computers also will verify that transaction and add it to a record. We'll call it a chain of events. So let's say Bob has this unit of money. He gives it to Lois. Lois gives it to Jill. Jill gives it to Karen. And they're transferring money all over the place. The chain of events will keep track of all those transactions. So at any given time, they'll know exactly which accounts have which units of money which are able to be spent. It will also prevent Bob from trying to spend his money twice. He won't be able to do a transaction with Lois and quickly turn around and try to do the same transaction with Jill, because every transaction is going to be authenticated and there will be the entire chain of events all the way to the beginning. Then if you go back deep enough, we'll have every single transaction that ever happened. Now, these citizens are great. I mean, they're donating their computer power to actually doing these calculations and the verifications and keeping track of this chain of events that happened with all these monetary units being transferred around. But what's in it for them? Now, you and I, we volunteered because we've got successful businesses and we had some extra time and we care about the city. But these guys with the computers, they ought to be paid back somehow. And here's what we'll do. We'll take some of our new currency and we'll reward them for the work they do. So let's say you have 20,000 computers and they're all cranking away. So maybe we take those 20,000 and we say, you know what, let's take some of our units here and let's reward those people who are maintaining the entire system for us. And let's go ahead and maybe dish out, I don't know, 3,000 to 4,000. I can't put a dollar sign there. Let's hand out 3,000 to 4,000 of these units on a daily basis across these group of computers that are actually keeping track of all the work for us. And that way will help us to distribute, 4,000. If we did 4,000 a day, it would take a long time to get, 21 million all into circulation. But that's a fair way. It's a fair way to get these units of currency into circulation and to do it fair based on who's actually putting forth the work. Now, let's say that everybody thinks it's a great idea. Wow! So we have, let's say, 60,000 people, and they all bought new computers to crank it because they want to make it. Well, they're still going to only hand out 4,000, units a day. approximately to all the people who are doing the work. So we can have some kind of a drawing of all the people who contributed and figure out who the winners are. So it's going to be less and less motivating for people to volunteer. But I'll tell you what, let's say we have 20,000 people that are doing it, and it goes down to 10,000. They think, you know what, there's a power crisis. I'm going to turn off my computer at night. I don't want to participate anymore. It goes down to 10,000. What happens to this 4,000 a day that are getting handed out? Well, the rewards for these people goes up. So the motivation is completely there. So this is a law of supply and demand as well. The more people that are in it, the less likely they're going to make a lot of, currency doing it. And the fewer people there are, the more opportunity for getting more rewards. So it balances itself out. It's like a self-adjusting throttle, if you will. And it's also a great throttle because we're not going to dump hundreds of thousands of new units into the system. And what we could do is we could even taper it off. So when it gets near the end, or maybe closer to the 21 million, we can start handing out maybe, 2,000 coin, and then maybe 1,000 coin, less coin for the actual work. And at that point, these people would say, you know what, it's no longer worth it for us to go ahead and do all this work of maintaining the chain of events, because there's just not that much reward. And here's what the cutover is. The cutover is once all the currency is released, or more of the currency is released, we can then go and have these same computers who are maintaining the chain of evidence and verifying the transactions. We can have those devices charge very small transaction fees, like maybe 25 cents for a transaction. So we have 100,000, constituents, citizens. They're all making lots of transactions. If you think of how many transactions a typical person makes in a week, and you put maybe a 25-cent charge or a 10-cent charge on that, it's going to be a lot of income that these individuals can still make. We can still divvy it up in a similar manner based on the actual transaction charges. Now, we have a couple of options. We could say, well, for our citizens, if you don't want the 25 evidence and verifying the transactions, we can have those devices charge very small transaction fees, like maybe 25 cents for a transaction. So we have 100,000, constituents, citizens. They're all making lots of transactions. If you think of how many transactions a typical person makes in a week, and you put maybe a 25-cent charge or a 10-cent charge on that, it's going to be a lot of income that these individuals can still make. We can still divvy it up in a similar manner based on the actual transaction charges. Now, for our citizens, we have a couple of options. We could say, well, for our citizens, if you don't want the 25 cents, I'll use 25 cents as a U.S. example. If you don't want the 25-cent transaction fee, we could go to something else. For example, we could use a fiat currency that's mandated by the government, and then we could have banks and other institutions, and they're going to charge you for transaction fees like 1.5% to 2%. So you take 25 cents versus 2% for $100, and that's just orders of magnitude difference. So this is a sweet deal. It's a lot less expensive for our citizens to do business and transactions, because on the backside, what happens is today in most environments is that if you and I go to a store, we buy something, we use a credit card, on the back end, that store is paying that 1% or 1.5% or 2% for the courtesy of allowing us to use that card. But they're paying the back end banking institution. So the bank, they're making that 2% from somebody, which is going to drive up the prices at that store. So having a very small transaction fee is going to be a huge benefit over a huge transaction fee. So what exactly is Bitcoin then? Well, Bitcoin boils down to the scenario that we just talked about. Bitcoin is two basic things. It is a money system. It is a currency. And they actually call the currency, you got it, Bitcoin. So we have euros, we have dollars, we have other names of monies and money systems elsewhere in the world. But in Bitcoin, they actually call the currency Bitcoin. So that's one of the things that it is. The second thing that Bitcoin is, it's a whole family of protocols that are working to make the system operate. For example, when Bob wants to send money to Lois, if he doesn't have the Bitcoin to send to Lois, the transaction won't happen. If he does have Bitcoin and he wants to send to Lois, the entire network is going to validate that transaction and record it. They're going to record that chain of evidence, the ledger, if you will, of where all the Bitcoins are going, and that ledger is called a blockchain. And every computer that wants to can participate in that blockchain for verification and recording of all the transactions that have taken place. This prevents Bob from spending the same Bitcoin twice. It also allows Lois, once that transaction is complete and been verified by the Bitcoin network, that she can go ahead and use them to transfer them for goods and services. Some very unique things about Bitcoin is because it's, number one, it's a currency, and number two, it's a whole family, a suite of protocols. There is no central authority. There's no central government or country or individual who's in charge of Bitcoin. It was developed as an open source project. It's been out for many years, 3 or 4 years now, and continuing. And it was built and designed with the concept that, hey, the internet's not a safe place. And so when we're transferring Bitcoin between individuals, it's not a trust factor. We're using some really significant cryptography and digital signatures to verify each of the transactions. And everybody who's maintaining the blockchain, they call those guys miners, who are verifying these transactions of the various blocks as they occur every 10 minutes. They are rewarded in Bitcoin for the work they have performed. And as a group with the tens of thousands of devices all doing mining, which is what they call this Bitcoin work for maintaining the network, they are being rewarded with Bitcoins which are being systematically delivered by the system. So it's not a guy with a crank saying, yep, let's give him some, let's give her some. It's a system that's done mathematically that automatically releases Bitcoins, and it's published. So it's no secret that, hey, there's 25 more Bitcoins that were just released for this block, and it went to this group of computers in Asia or in Europe or in the United States for their contribution for maintaining the blockchain and the transactions that happened in the last 10 minutes within that new block that's been added to the blockchain. Now, regarding value, it's interesting about value for Bitcoin because it's really not tied to anything, and everybody knows that. So, for example, to start off this Nugget series, I thought I want to go and get myself set up. So how do I get Bitcoin? And there's several ways you can get Bitcoin. You can beg for them and say, hey, here's my address. Please send me Bitcoin if you have them. Or you can provide a good or service. So, for example, if you have a business, especially an online business, and you're selling T-shirts or sweaters or whatever you're selling, you could go ahead and make one option for payment, Bitcoin. And then individuals who want to pay you with Bitcoin could pay it. So an individual could purchase it with their local currency. You could go to a currency exchange, which there are several of them, and you could say, here's X number of my local currency. I want to go ahead and purchase what the current going rate is for Bitcoin. Now at the moment it's hovering somewhere between $14 and $16 as I speak right now. And that price will fluctuate. It's not always going to stay at that. It's about supply and demand. As more people think this is valuable, there will be more people buying in and investing in it. And if more people want to invest or use Bitcoin, because the supply is not infinite and we don't dump hundreds of thousands of new Bitcoin into the system every day, it's a gradual, mathematical, controlled release of Bitcoin. Inflation is not likely to happen. In fact, as we hit the 21 million mark, which is the maximum number of Bitcoin that ever will be released, it's likely we're going to have something called deflation, where a Bitcoin is going to increase in value and increase in value and increase in value. And as that happens, we don't actually have to use a whole Bitcoin for purchases. So, for example, if a Bitcoin is worth, I'm just giving a round number of $1,000 for a Bitcoin, and you want to buy some movie tickets, or you want to buy something that's less than $1,000, you can use tenths or hundredths or thousands or millionths of a Bitcoin. So we could purchase something, for example, for 0.0001 Bitcoin. And based on whatever the current going rate is for a full Bitcoin, that would represent some portion of a Bitcoin. So we can go down over to 8 positions, like that, which is very, very small. So we don't have to have more than 21 million. And the good news is, because it's a system that's in place, it's not controlled by a human who can, change the rules, that number, because it won't increase, we're not going to have inflation, very likely. As far as losing value, that's up to what happens. So at CBT Nuggets, we're not financial consultants. We make no recommendations on a specific product or anything else. I just want to point out that if everybody stopped using Bitcoin and said, you know what, this is no good for whatever reason, it would lose value. On the other hand, if everybody thinks it's a good system and it's strong and it's not breakable and that it's something for the long haul, the value will simply keep on going up. That's completely dependent on variables that happen. At the moment, as an investment in my own life, I would say it's a high-risk currency. And I do say high risk because it's not all in our control. And this is a very, very new thing. It's just barely been 3 or 4 years since it's been rolled out. And with anything being new, there's a lot of variables. How's the government, whatever government you happen to be within the realm of, how are they going to approach it? How are they going to use it? How are they going to tax it? Because trust me, all those questions have yet to be answered in full by the local governments in which we live. So for this box loses value, the answer is time will tell. In this nugget, we've taken a look at a new digital currency, and it's called Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the name of the currency. It also happens to be the name of the set of protocols that makes it all possible. I also want to point out that Bitcoin is also a transaction system that allows individuals who have Bitcoin to go ahead and transfer those Bitcoins or portions of those Bitcoins from one person or one entity to another, doing it all securely with cryptography and having it verified by a large Bitcoin network. There's so much more I'm excited to share with you about Bitcoin, and guess what? We're going to do it right here in this series, and I'll see you in the next nugget. I hope this information has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.